sweetheart, though. In regards to why you remember, why you can't remember, what happened when you tried to remember, and all these other things. There's a lot of components to it, and we're going to start. If I first ask you, tell me something about memory. Something in the past. It's a short term and a long term. You can lose it. Age just makes you lose it. Stress makes you forget things. Permanent events can actually permanently be remembered. It can be erased, what we call blocked. Y'all think this is a trick question? It's not. Okay.
You wouldn't really know who you are. That's what makes you a person, because you have to remember the words you say. Like, you wouldn't be able to talk yet. You
Okay.
wouldn't be able to do anything really.
Talking influence who you are. Okay. Anything else? Okay. So you guys have made your mind and your memory the same thing.
Yeah, but you wouldn't know what words meant if you didn't remember learning as a child. It's not like if you were with all your memories, you're just doing it how to talk.
Memory is just a small part of your mind. Your mind
Mm.
takes in and it stores into your memory. And then it can kind of open up the file and say, okay, this is where
And which part is that?
I
Oh my. That's got a part, but that's not the part. The hippocampus. So we're going to take, all of you got different things you said. So we've got the Broca's and awareness area. Great. It allows this to happen, but it has to have the hippocampus to allow anything to occur. We can speak without memory. The problem is it won't make sense. So we got hippocampus. Hippocampus retrieves stuff. So we've got all of these parts, and now we're going to break it down. The memory's not, we talk about the three basic ones, sensory, short-term, long-term, but there's a lot more inside of this brain. Okay, so you got brain, mind, memory, all three different elements. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's get into the first part. This is the reason why most of you don't remember. Okay, first part of memorizing or remembering anything, first thing you have to do is process. What does process mean? Understand. What else? If I'm processing something, what am I doing?
Maybe it's changing the stimulus into something.
Okay, so I'm using some information that is understandable, but we go back to understanding. What else are we doing? You're relating it. What else do? You relate, we process, we understand, we compare. If we were having a conversation and I said to you, let me go and process this. I'm organizing it. I'm classifying it. Analyzing it.
It's like they just got lost, right?
Okay, keep going. You gonna use some terms from the past? Let's see how you about to do this. Go ahead. It's the Gestalt terms, and which means we give what? We give it a what? He was on a roll too. What are those? What is proximity, similarity? What is that concept all about? When you learned that, where'd you learn it? Goes back to Jonathan's idea of losing it after you used it. Where did you learn that? What chapter was it? Let's start there. Three. What was the three? What's chapter 3 about? Okay, so similarity, closure was under what part of the senses? Okay, how many senses do you have? All right, now out of the 5, what was that under? Sight. Right. So to remember things, I need to probably do what? Okay. So this is the image that we have. For you to encode anything, encoding literally means I engrave it. I usually use the analogy. Everybody ever seen something engraved in things to remember, or some personalized shop in the mall? Yes? A trophy. Okay. What do they do? What does this machine do? It goes over it and over it and over it. It engraves it into a metal. Is that correct? What happens over time to this metal? It might tarnish, but what can I still read? The engraving. That's the biggest part. Your mind might tarnish, but if you encode it, you'll forever have it. Does that make sense? But there was a key that Tia said. How do we encode? How does a machine engrave? It goes over it and over it and over it again. You guys don't do that. No. You also don't.
Well, what if you sometimes we just forget it? Because sometimes I do that, and then like the minute I take the test, it just completely
Thank you so much.
goes right
Because
into my brain.
you encoded it, but then the problem happened right here. So this is the brain. I'm going to show you what happens inside the mind. This is what your memory actually looks like. All right, so you've got more than this, but we're just going to give you a short view of your brain, your mind. All right, so you've got psychology because you all are in here. Some of you got math. Some of you got biology. Some of you got a job. Some of you got a relationship. Some of you got children. Some of you just got some life mess. Some of you got some past. Some of you got some health. All right, so we've got all these folders. We agree? What storage folder should be open right now? Right, this should be open. We all agree, correct? But technically, this is probably open because you're thinking, when I get to the doctor, what I should do. This is probably open because you're thinking, as soon as I leave here, I need to make sure I do this. This is probably open because you're thinking, if he does not call about 5 o'clock, it is on. This is probably open because you're thinking, did they pay my check? Did they give me my check? Did they give me my check? Is my check right? When I get out of this class, I have to make sure my check is right. I wonder if I'm having to pay that bill. All right. So all this is open, and what did I tell you should be open? So this is what's happening as I talk. Now, it's time to take the test. The test says psychology. The brain recognizes we are doing psychology. We've got to take a test. Stay focused. Now, the minute you tell the brain to stay focused, it's going to stay focused. That is one thing the brain will do. If you tell it to stay focused, if you give it a task, it will do the task. Okay, have you ever had a puzzle in front of you or somebody ask you a question and you're like, until I figure that out? How many people have said, do you know who sings that song? You like, no, I know. You try to keep going on and all you keep thinking is, I got to figure out who sings that song. Because the brain, if given a task, it will complete the task. So in front of the computer, psychology opens up. Your brain says, we must complete this task. Open the folder. You open the folder. You start to take the test. And you like, I know this stuff, but I can't remember it. The reason why, it's not stored in that folder. It's stored here and here and here and here. So when you try to retrieve it, which means to go back and get it, you've stored it in so many other places, you can't retrieve it. So what happens is 3 days later, when you recall and be like, oh my God, that was what it was, you finally found it.
So if I start thinking about problems with pop-up,
Yes. If you sit there and be like, what was I sitting in class thinking about? Oh, my bills. Oh yeah, she did talk about memory. It'll pop up.
Well, I've heard that if you listen to a certain song or chew a certain gum while you're studying, if you chew that same gum while you're in class, it'll help you remember.
Yes, we'll talk about on Thursday. It's called state dependent and contextual dependent memory. What it literally says is, if I take you back to the state of mind, for some reason the mind will trigger the event. So when you study, we always tell you, if you study with a certain type of music, you must take your assessment or your test with that same playlist. The reason why is the mind starts to link these things together. How many times have you gone into a room and you stood there like, what did I come in here to get? And then you go back and you say, okay, I was standing here and I was thinking about going home, and I said, when I go home, all you did was did the same thing. You took yourself back to the state to recall what you went to go get. So that's all it is. Literally, we trigger you back to the state. We often tell you, when you take your final exam, I tell you, sit next to the same people you sit next to in class. The reason why, they have linked to memory. Okay, they link to memory. If you drink coffee while you study, drink coffee when you take your test. It's linked to the memory.
So if you go back, you don't then use the other side.
No, you never. No, I'm gonna tell you why. It's always hope.
I don't know if we'll get into this, but how do you focus your mind and put everything into that second folder?
Yes, staying mindful, and I think we talk about it later. So it's a technique, mindfulness. Mindfulness is probably one of the hardest things to do. Mindfulness is on the same line as meditation. It literally means to stay in the here and now. It's very hard for people to stay in the here and now because there's so many other things that you find precedent over the here and now. Matter of fact, what was the first thing I said when I walked into the class? I think that was the first thing. That right there shows you that was what they focused on. That was impactful. Did I say that first?
You don't even know what you said.
What'd I say?
No, because we talked
Did I?
to you first.
Uh-huh. See what starts to happen? Nobody knows, but because it's too many, you got a whole lot of stories, but it shows you what was open during the time people were doing something. Okay? 10 different stories. And it's 10 different stories. One, we already talked about it. Sensation, we all picked it up. Perception, we all perceived it different. And then memory, we all stored it in a different place. If I was scared, it's going in another folder. If it was interesting, it's going in another folder. I can ask you about a TV show you watched 2 years ago. If it was interesting, you could tell me the detail exactly. I used to watch, back in the day, The Cosby Show. If I watch it now, I'll be like, oh my God, I remember that episode. I haven't seen that show in probably 20 years. But because it was interesting, I stored it.
But can't something be so fun that you forget what it was about?
Usually, the stupider it is, the longer you remember it.
But I thought something so funny and try to have.
The dumber it is, the longer it lasts.
On the test, dude buddy was getting mugged, and he was listening to music, there was a trumpet. Okay, should it not have been whatever he was focused on is what would be the stimuli control or conditioned stimuli?
That was a confusing.
I have to read it. Because you just gave it to me in all jumbled up.
Like with interest watching the line and doing something else, looked like which one would cause his like memory to come back, and it gave all three.
Which one would be his conditioning stimuli?
Yeah.
And you said,
And I said, whichever one he was focused
I said it.
what was the options?
It was either the
The answer
trumpet
was
player,
Or
the
mine.
mine, or something else.
I can't remember the
Yeah,
first one.
kids playing in the background, something like that.
Then I'm about to show you how memory works.
Like flowers. Or
Now, the test was created in the summer. You asking me to remember in September. I got probably all of these and some more. So if I read it, I can tell you, but it does sound like whatever they're paying attention to, it becomes what I link it to. So even in like here,
So it said the answer was whatever he's focusing on at that time would be what we want.
it's the same as like here in regards to if we use encoding. Some of you are paying attention to me, you'll remember things. You'll just remember things because you paid attention. Some people won't recall anything because it wasn't what they were paying attention to. Some people remember this slide, a picture of it, but don't recall what was on it. Some of you will take an exam and literally say, it's on some slide we had, it's on some slide we had, and you're going to search for the slide. Not because you recall what was the information, you just remember the picture of it. Some of you are going to remember what I said, but can't remember what it looked like. So it's literally like you got all of these different things, but literally whatever I'm paying attention to is what I'm going to link everything to. go back to the last chapter. If I'm paying attention to my grandmother and every time I'm over there she's cooking something, I'm going to link it because that smell is linked to the thing I was paying attention to, which was my grandmother. Does that make sense? Every time my boyfriend comes out of the bathroom, he has this exact same scent on every time. So when he opens the door, I'm expecting the scent to just out the door. It's just what happens. So if anybody walks by me, my first response is I pay attention to that smell because it's linked to him. The smell is linked to him. My telephone, he has his own separate ring. If I ever hear the song, it links to him. It's my concentration. It's just what happens. Does that make sense? If you hear the thing, dun dun dun, what does that tell you is coming on? You're in the kitchen. Law and Order. Why do you just pay attention? You hear dun dun dun, you like it's starting, you run to the screen because it literally has you paying attention. They do it on purpose. They literally say no matter where you are in your house, if we start this sound, you know we are starting our series. All 9 different Law and Orders, SVU, Criminal Minds, Intent, all of them, dun dun dun, you know we're starting. It's whatever you pay attention to. And it's the same in class. The problem you're going to learn in a couple slides, you don't pay attention to everything. And it's just the way memory works. You're going to pay attention to the beginning and the end. True.
Okay, I know you said you got different
Slides.
but
Hmm.
how can students remember everything?
You do.
You just don't have access.
Yes.
Well, why would you have access?
Well, when you get some more slides on Thursday, there's a reason why. There's 2 reasons why you can't access it. And you jump in, but I'll tell you the 2. It's either interference or decay. These are the 2 things. So your life, you've got access to it. The problem is interference occurs. So you got all of this other stuff. Whichever's the most important to you draws your attention first. This is why you can read a book. I don't want to say that out loud, but I'm just not a person that's going to pick up a book like, oh my God, let me spend the next 3 hours of my life and read this book. That's just not me. I'm not her. Now, if you say, oh, Sheree, it's a movie coming out about the book, I'm going to be like, oh, let's go watch it. How long is it? 4 hours. Let's go watch this movie. Because I'm just not and everybody in the Gen Ed pod are book readers. Okay, so they're like, did you read the book? I'm like, what's the book? And they're like, oh my God, I read that 2 years ago. Okay. And they're like all in the hall talking. And I'm like, is it a movie about this book? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, I really don't care then. And while they're talking, I'm literally Googling the book like, I just still don't want to read this book. But this is how they store information. They can spend time and literally tell 2 years later about this book because that's what they spend the time to. I could sit there and read that book. And you could ask me right after I finish reading it, Shree, what was the book about? It has some characters in it.
Like I could go through a 300-page book in a day.
Novel.
I know.
love that,
It's
but I have a hard
disgusting.
time.
But I can't read our books. Like I'll read it and be like, what did I just read? And then read it again. What did I just read?
Perfect example. If you challenge the mind, and I'm going to tell you the best way to study and read anything, you have to ask yourself 3 questions before you start reading. So textbooks are probably the ones you have to do it because textbooks are the ones you hate the most. So you get to this chapter and it's about short-term memory. You read the bold part and it says short-term memory. You literally say, I need to know what is short-term memory about, how long does it last, and what does it do? The reason why you have to tell yourself, the mind now says, I got 3 things I must find out when I read it. I must pay attention. The mind will pay attention to you answer those 3 questions. Once those 3 questions are answered, the mind will go away. Once you do, that's what you don't want to do. And literally what you have to do, you got to pay attention because the book kind of tells you what's in each chapter. So if we go and we just look and we say, okay, elaborate rehearsal. I need to know what it is, what's the purpose, and how can it go away. When I tell myself these 3 things, I read the chapter, I read this part, I answer the 3 questions, I then recap what I just read. It seems like a long process, but it cuts a lot of times of you reading it, don't know what you read, have to reread it, still don't know what you read, have to reread it. You just did all of that when you could have did it in 3, which is why multitasking is so difficult. When you multitask, you open up too many folders and it's hard to focus on one. The minute the mind is split, the concentration is split.
So that's why they're
To tell you, this is what I want you to focus on when you start reading. If you focus on these questions and can answer them, you'll remember the information. You've got to challenge your mind. Your mind likes challenges. The minute your mind's not challenged, it becomes routine. When it becomes routine, it becomes habit. When it becomes habit, there's no processing. It's just automatic.
So my process of using it for a short period and getting it.
The mind literally said there's no purpose for this. Let's, for instance, I took psychology. Ooh, I'm about to just tell all about my, how long. I took intro to psychology in 1993. Woo! All right. So 1993, I sat in a psychology class. Now, I'm going to be honest to you guys. In the field of psychology, we knew nothing, no more of this after 1993. After 1993, it has no relevance to us anymore. Because everything else is more advanced, more about something else. So since 1993, I haven't used any of this in regards to the field. We just don't use it. But what I had to realize is if I took it and I started using it every day in some type of way, it became permanent. So I can change a book every year if I wanted to and never read it again. Because it's permanent. Does that make sense? I'm going to tell you, we got some math teachers, and we hired some new math teachers, and they literally said, we need the book. So we were like, what do they need the book for? You know, it's math. The concepts are the same. And they said, oh, we need to practice. Okay, you got math. You're a math teacher. You need a math book so you can practice. And they're like, oh, we haven't used it in a while. Well, that doesn't make sense. Compared to the ones who use it all the time, they didn't need it. It's there, but until you have to use it, you won't. There's going to be stuff in this class that you're going to literally, you've encoded it, you stored it. It might be 10 years from today. Somebody's going to say something to you, and you're going to retrieve it like, that's what she was talking about. It makes sense, because that's how the mind works. But if you don't store it, you'll never retrieve it. Does that make sense? Now, in regards to encoding, practice makes what? If you don't practice it, it's gone. You have to practice the rehearsal. You want to write that word down. Rehearsal. Practice and rehearsal are the same thing. Now, there's a catch about memory. Memory is one of these things that's really hard, and it's hard simply because memory has what we call a duration and a capacity. Duration is how long it lasts. Capacity is how much it holds. Duration is how long it lasts. Capacity is how much it holds. Duration, how long it lasts. Capacity, how much it holds. When we go through these different types of memory, you're going to hear me say these words a lot. The duration is blah, blah, blah. The capacity is something else. So duration, how long. Capacity, how much. The founders, Atkinson and Schifrin, they are the founders, and we call them founders, but they are the ones that kind of gave this formula in regards to how we do memory. They divide it into three different types: sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. That's the big scope. So literally, we've got other memory inside of it, but the big scope is you've got sensory memory, short-term memory, long-term memory. Okay? We're going to first talk about sensory memory. Sensory memory's duration, very short, typically less than 1 second. That's not a long time, but it literally takes in all of your senses. We've got two that we talk. These are two different types of memory inside of your sensory memory: iconic memory and echoic memory. These are two types of memory inside of your sensory memory. Iconic memory is visual memory. Iconic memory is visual memory. It's inside of your sensory memory. Okay? Iconic memory is visual memory inside of your sensory memory. It's the things you take a picture of. Now, many times in life you literally say, I've seen that before. You can't really tell more than that. It's just that I've seen it before. You don't know where you saw it before. You don't know who it was. You just know I've seen it before. That was iconic memory. It left an impression, but it's not stored. Does that make sense? Echoic memory, it's memory that you've heard or that you hear. You can say sometimes, I've heard her voice before. I don't know where I know it. I just know that voice from somewhere. How many times have you gone to the grocery store? The person that you've dealt with at the checkout line, you've dealt with them so much that you start to recognize who they are outside of the place. It's just literally, you first turn into iconic then it moves and starts to store. So we got the difference. Yes? Capacity, very large. It holds all 5 senses. Echoic is what I heard, yeah. Capacity, it has very large. It holds all 5 senses. Sensory memory. We're going to come back to the Sperling experiment. Let's go ahead and talk about it. With the Sperling experiment, what this was a test in regards to toning. What it talks about really, it gives this whole idea in regards to how sensory memory works. First thing you have to do is pay attention. Memory does not work if you don't pay attention. Okay, so you first have to pay attention. Another thing it learned, the larger the capacity you try to hold, the less it will actually retain. Does that make sense? If you try to cram a lot of information into one 10, 15 minute, it won't hold. How many of you study for about 2 to 3 hours a day at one time? Good. I was hoping you didn't raise your hand. How many study for at least 1 hour straight at a time? Okay, technically you're 15 minutes over your limit. It should be 30 to 45 minutes. You take a 10 to 15 minute break. 30 to 45 minutes, stop. The reason why, the larger the capacity, you'll start to lose information. 30 to 45 minutes is as much time as your brain can focus on one task and hold it in an effort to process it. So 30 to 45 minutes, focus, break.
So why are classes so long?
Because we don't care. Our idea, classes are introduction, and then you're on your own. But in high school, remember, it's supposed to be like 50 minutes for a class. We technically are a 50-minute class. We just combine classes together. Yeah, we create a 3-hour. If we did it every day, you'll be fine. You'll be here for 50 minutes. But because you don't do it every day, we then have to spread you out. And by the time you get here, we're like, you should learn how to work this out. All right, so pay attention. Don't use a lot of information. You then have to access the information for a purpose. Does this make sense? Literally, we go back to what me and Jonathan were just talking about. If I don't use it for something, I don't have a purpose for it. Okay, so for me to remember this thing, I have to pay attention. I can't use it in large parts, and then I have to use it for a purpose. If it doesn't have a purpose, it doesn't have a point. That's how the memory looks at it. If I don't have any purpose for it, other than to take an exam, I have no use for it. Once the exam is over, I deposit it. Got it? Perfect example. Why do you brush your teeth in the morning? It's nasty? For a good reason? Okay, so we trying to be healthy, don't want our teeth to fall out for a good reason. It taste nasty, bad breath, all these are your reasons. Habit. Now, this is the morning, because I asked you a question. I said, why do you brush your teeth in the morning? Why don't you brush your teeth in the middle of the day? And why do you have to do that, Caleb? Okay. Okay, so now we not brushing. Now we got a new reason why we ain't brushing. We brush teeth. Kayla know where her teeth fall out her head, and Tia think it's disrespectful if you don't brush it. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you, we got quite a few disrespectful people in the room who might be having some teeth fall out. Now, why do you brush your teeth before you go to bed? So,
It's sitting out in the open. It's just sitting in your mouth and bacteria is accumulating on that. So it's literally rotting in your mouth.
now the Kate just gave y'all this whole theory that this bacteria is sitting in your mouth, just rotting. Some of y'all right now feel like, oh God, I wish I had a toothbrush. Okay, if I could just when I get home, I'm brushing my teeth. Tonight, I'm gonna brush my teeth before I go to bed. Why are you now about to start brushing your teeth before you go to bed?
I just get
You just she gave you an image of my teeth. This chicken. Tia gave us chicken. We don't have no teeth, so we got this combination. I'm imagining these pieces of chicken in between my teeth. I'm imagining this filth, disgusting, just bacteria just raw and just roaming all around my mouth. And I'm thinking that, oh my God, it's plaque just sitting up there.
Guys, what you're trying to do is back into the office, and he used to come in every 3 months. But this time he waited over 7. The amount of plaque that built up in his mouth made it look like he had an extra tooth. And whenever they took the drill to it, it was a chunk that fell off. And I was like, oh my God, that's not like, that is why you brush your teeth. That way you don't have an extra plaque.
Now, watch this. Why does she pay more attention to that? Because she literally just told you the reason why. Some of you are like, I don't even think of plaque like that. Like, when I go get toothpaste, I like the one that tastes the best. The end. It ain't even that serious. She's in there looking at the toothpaste like, plaque build up 37%. Eliminates odor 52%. Not a good choice. Plaque build up 50%. Oh, we up to 50%. She pays attention to different things. Does that make sense? So she has the knowledge. She's giving you all of this knowledge that then once you start to use it, you're now going to start to say, if a little kid came up to you, 3 years old, and says, I don't want to brush my teeth ever again. Right from this point on, you're going to tell this 3-year-old what? What are you going to say?
Food rotting in his mouth.
Uh-huh. Why? Convince this 3-year-old to brush their teeth. See what just happened? Now, I can ask you guys this 2 weeks later, and I say to you guys, why should we brush our teeth? Guess what you're going to tell me? Plaque tooth. Plaque, build it up. Oh my God, they might have to brush it, and then they got to take the drill and knock it off. Why? Because you've accessed it, and you're going to probably keep doing it. Now, every time you brush your teeth in the morning, you're going to start looking at them like, okay? That's what this whole... That's what this experiment was all about. What you pay attention to, what you start to input in regards to its capacity. And what she did, she didn't give you a lot of information. She just literally gave you a snapshot of what occurred. I'm sure that visit was longer than the 2 seconds that she took to explain it. Plaque so big, had to clip it, 2 hours. And she took it into not a lot of information compared to if she had broke down and told you everything that they did in there, she would have lost you. Does that make sense? So when you're trying to retain information, first thing it says, take the information to where you can comprehend it, pay attention to it, and then use it. Everything in this book, some of this stuff, when you read this book, some of this is unnecessary junk. I'm not even going to lie to you. The writers had to create enough pages to sell it for $70. So some of it, all them examples, useless information. That's why you see those little bold things that stay on the side like this. That's the useful stuff. Those little vocabulary words, that's the important stuff. That's all you technically need to read.
Sometimes there's stuff in there that you just need for the quiz that's just not.
Of course, got to make sure you use the $70. But the idea is, most of you read this and still be like, what the heck are they talking about? This just breaks it down for you to make sure you understood what that was. Does that make sense? That's all that experiment was about. So in regards to it, so what we found out, a lot of times people store everything in what is called short-term memory. You live out of your short-term memory. Short-term memory, it is 30 seconds long at most, which means after 30 seconds, it's gone. It lasts 30 seconds or less. It holds 7 plus or minus 2 units. You want to write that little riddle down. 7 plus or minus 2 units. 7 plus or minus 2 units.
Okay, that's all we get told.
Uh-huh.
That's the only length of time.
Uh-huh.
Why is it a person has a problem remembering something just said, just done, just
Rehearsal. If you don't, the thing with 30 seconds, 30 seconds, I'll tell you something right now. Right now, I'm going to give you a phone number. the phone number?
6714787.
All right. Now, every time you said it over, 30 seconds started over. 30 seconds started over. 30 seconds started over. The problem is, if I keep giving you more and more information, and you don't keep repeating it, this 5 or 9 units are disappearing. The 30 seconds is leaving. So the more I keep giving you more information, the more numbers I give you, it's gone. Like right now, I want everybody to count from 100 down. Count. 100. Y'all don't know how to count? Let's try this all as a group. Then we're going back to kindergarten. We start with 100. Then we have, then comes, then comes, then comes, then comes, then comes, and then what's the phone number? What's happening at the same time as you're saying it? You're doing the numbers. You're in your mind, keep saying this phone number over and over. The reason why you need that 30 seconds to keep starting. 30 seconds keep starting. Back in the day, remember you had information where you called information, they gave you the phone number, and then you had to keep saying the phone number, and you hope nobody said anything to you while you were trying to remember the phone number so you can dial it.
Do you know how many of them don't remember?
I know. Every time I get that example, they're like, we don't call information. You Google search. No. Back in the day, 411. You dialed it and you said, the operator, it was a person. Back in the day, people came on the phone and they were like, hello, so-and-so, can I help you? And for 411 information. And you like, what city, please? And you like, Atlanta. And they're like, Atlanta, okay, business, residential. And you had to answer their question and they gave you the phone number. Then you had to say, Ma, I got the number. What's the number? I'm gonna call back, Ma. Don't call that back. That's 75 cents. Right? It was just something we did back in the day. All right. Then they got auto dial, push 1. But back in the day, you had to remember, and you were hoping nobody said something. So while your brother started talking, you were like, "Shut up! I'm gonna forget the number," because you can only hold 5 to 9 units. Okay. A phone number has 7 units. But there's a kick. You can actually do what is called chunking. Now, read them alphabet. Exactly. That's chunking. Now, if you read it, I, B, M, N, F, L, M, B, A, Y, M, C, A. Now, what you probably did was IBM, NFL, NBA, YMCA. I now only used 4 units. When technically it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 units. I wouldn't have been able to hold them all. Does that make sense? So I chunk them to create less units. But what happens with chunking, chunking goes to a familiar place. So when you chunk, you actually chunk based on experiences of the past. If nobody ever heard of IBM, they probably wouldn't have chunked them together. They would probably say IB, MN, FL, MB, AAY, MCA. But when you chunk it, you chunk based on past information. Does that make sense? Chunking is a skill. It's called a mnemonic. You want to write that word down. Mnemonic. You probably wasn't going to spell it like that. I know you weren't. It's a mnemonic. Mnemonics are tricks for the short-term memory. Now, I told you guys, the brain likes stupid stuff. What's the order of operation in math? How many of you got a Dear Aunt Sally? 1 person, 2 people. Why the rest of y'all remember that? What's the slogan for you to know north, south, east, and west? Okay. How do you spell Mississippi? Right, we learn M-I, cricket letter I, humpback, I. They're all mnemonics. They're stupid things the brain uses to remember things. That's why you sing. Like if I say right now, tell me your alphabet. Everybody tell me the alphabet, the first 10 letters. Go. Most of you didn't already sung it. You already got a tune going. Okay. The reason why, because it's literally the way mnemonics work. They work based on what you recall in regards to remembering. If I needed to call and get some carpet, I need to call Empire. What's the number?
800-588-2300.
See? Why does she know that? You called for carpet recently?
No, the commercial.
Exactly. Even the commercials know. If we give you a mnemonic, you'll remember it. What's the slogan for McDonald's? Go ahead, Nia. What are you doing? Uh huh. What do I do at McDonald's? I'm probably doing what? I'm loving it, I know. Uh huh. Why do you remember those things?
Commercial, they
Commercials know if I put it with a mnemonic, you'll remember it longer. So if anybody was in if somebody was in a student center and they were like, dang it, I need to go get some carpet. And they were like, who can I call? You'll probably be like, I know the number to Empire. They know that. Does that make sense? J.G. Wentworth, what does he do?
Seven cash down.
There you go. Reason why they know these things and they do it to you on purpose. If you make it stupid, you'll learn it. You'll actually learn it faster. Make it stupid. You ever heard of the slogan KISS? Do you know what KISS stands for? Keep it simple, stupid. Because literally, the simpler it is, the brain likes it. The more complex it is, the brain starts to go like, that's too much. We don't like that. Because it goes back to whose principle? There you go.
So you learn to never remember what is simple.
When you're younger, honestly, people who are younger children learn faster. And they learn faster because of one reason. They don't have interference. A young child is truly a sponge. If you put it in front of them, they can learn 5 different languages, no problem. They could learn to do sign language, Chinese, Japanese, English, and Braille, all in a couple of months. They have no interference. But what they realize is how I train them to learn is how they'll always learn. Most of you study the basis on the way that you learn from 1st to 2nd grade. And you've kept it all the way to college. The problem is, in 1st or 2nd grade, you were learning words in a line. It's now time for you to do something different. You've been conditioned. Does that make sense? How many of you remember doing spelling words back in 3, 5? Okay. What did you do about these spelling words? How'd you learn these spelling words? Okay. One person then tossed them in the trash. What'd you do, Josh? Sounds okay. We sounded it out. Then what did you do? You said it over and over and over again. How did you say them? According to what? What'd you say, Amy? How they were written on the page. Now, so I'm going to say these over and over again. I'm going to spell them out. I'm going to sound them out according to how they're written on the page. Then your teacher then says the middle word first. You're taking your test, and she wants you to spell the middle word first. You don't know it. Why don't you know it? You studied it in order, and the way it was written. You remember seeing it this way because you really don't know it. Does that make sense? That's how this whole process of memory works. Memory, literally, in regards to short-term memory, goes in order, the way you took it in, and how you use it.
How about like, okay, I'm going on school,
That's okay.
right?
They need to learn.
You remember brown paper bags?
Yeah.
Okay.
They still sell them, though.
Do they? Okay. My dad used to, like, cut it and open it up, and I would have to write those words like 50 times each, over and over. So now, like, listening to you, I can listen to you, but by taking notes, I actually get more from writing it down. Is that why?
You go back to the original way that you learn. Not just that, writing down is nothing but rehearsal. If you write things down, you take notes in this class, you go back and you write again, you go back and you read, all you're doing is rehearsing. Rehearsal. Now, there's a catch. Hearing short-term memory lasts longer than seeing short-term memory.
I remember that. Because it's read out loud.
Read out loud. Because there's been times where you're driving and you tell people, be quiet, I can't see. Quit talking, I can't watch TV. Listen what Gina just said. Mothers say it all the time. Be quiet, I'm trying to find this address. Interesting. Be quiet so I can find this address. Why? Because hearing lasts longer than seeing. I often tell people sometimes if you don't do well, sometimes taking notes should be done at home. Listening in class should be done in class. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I'm not gonna remember.
That's why I tape it. Yeah, Nia. When I say that, people be like, "Oh, there it is, no more notes." Yes and no.
Depends on the person, I think, because in the first week I decided that, because I used to take notes, I was write everything that anyone would say, but then I don't remember what you were saying because I was too busy trying to take the information from what you were saying and trying to remember.
That's the problem with people taking notes. When people try to take notes, they try to write down everything that is said. While you're writing down, you miss something else that I said.
That's what I.
But what if you're neither one of those? I don't know. I learned about doing. So
What is that called?
Hands-on, that's.
That's not what that's called.
No, it's hands-on.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. Woo woo.
I have
Okay.
to like write notes down and put them in different areas of the room and just like go to the different ones and then that's how and I be running around my own.
Maybe it's just me.
Kinesthetic learners are that. Kinesthetic learners, we've got 3 types of learners. We might as well just find out now. I should have gave y'all a test to find out what type of learner you are. It's visual, acoustic, and kinesthetics. It's just the type that we have. Now, visual learners watch this PowerPoint. That's why I put the PowerPoints up. Acoustic learners just need to hear me. That's why I talk. Kinesthetic learners have to write notes down because they need to do something. That's also why I'd use examples so that you can come back to me, because the kinesthetic learners can't learn through seeing and hearing. They need to engage to do stuff. So you can learn your kinesthetic learners because they're usually the ones that's going to talk back and forth, because that's how they're going to process. So acoustic learners can hear it, they just remember it. Visual learners can see it, they just remember it. Kinesthetic learners have to do something to retain
So
it.
it's like when I say like, oh, it's like this. And this.
You're a kinesthetic learner.
And when I was little, to remember Bible verses, just table, I would walk around it 50 times.
I was trying to remember spelling words. That's not my like.
I was gonna go out and go to my parents.
You throw the Bible?
A ball, like
Oh,
a ball.
yes.
I always feel the word this time.
Yeah, you're kinesthetic.
That's where I got that
There's
from.
one
Say
girl,
something.
Jump roping.
herself jump roping.
Yeah, it's she's a kinesthetic. Aquila. Yeah, it's just like it's a kinesthetic it's a kinesthetic thing. Some of you literally learn, you tap. When somebody says, "Do you remember something?" You like, you're a kinesthetic learner. You trigger things based on rhythm. So the way you have to learn is based on rhythm. When you read, you got to give a rhythm to it. Try it. It kind of works. Also, sometimes put it to music. Music lasts in short-term memory for a very long time.
But should we put it to words or music that repeats?
You want instrument. That's a good point. When you listen to music and study, please don't have words in the music. Because you like, don't you stop, short-term memory, and I love you. So you like, wait. Don't you stop, short-term. You'd have messed all up.
And you remember that?
Okay, then you're going to remember, don't you stop. Like, that's my song. No, you was trying to remember short-term memory. Get the instrumental version and put it to it. But all you got to do is go on YouTube and literally type songs about psychology founders. They got a rap song, a classical song, an R&B song. They got it all. The developmental chapter. Go on YouTube. They got a song for it. And just play it.
Like, hey, 3 hours studying, like, music that helps you study.
It's
It's just
a,
a lot of just music that repeats itself, and you can just I do that. I even put static going.
that's another. Who has children? Who has a lot of busy life home? Your home is just loud. Okay, you're probably gonna have a very hard time on final exam day because it's very silent. It's very quiet. You like the noise that you've learned to function in the noise. Okay, you're just the type of person that the noise gets you good. You're good. Then those people who like studying in the library, they can't stand at final time. They have a hard time because in final exam you hear. And they're like, oh my God, these noises are killing me. So you got these 2 different things. That's why I tell people, bring some earphones, because you need to block out all of this so you can get into your zone and access your stuff. Yes.
Even if it's not one touch.
Yes.
Yeah, see, I have it loud, but I like light when I'm studying.
Then you might have to get that music just like ding 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 ding. Da, 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 da. Oh, oh. need to play it. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. A, B, C. Oh my God. Oh, you might have to put all the nursery rhymes. That's you might just one day record everybody in the house and just sit there. Uh, Understanding how short-term memory. One thing you need to know, active versus passive. This is another reason why some of you guys are horrible at remembering. You are passive rehearsals. You do passive learning. Okay? Passive learning. What chapter are we on? Okay. I got it. Passive learning. What did you do with it? You passively just took in the information. Active, you had to engage in the process. Active learning, in regards to rehearsal, you have to engage in the process. What are the 3 things you have to do to engage? I just taught it to you. Thank you. See it? Hear it? And store it in regards to, how do I store? I have to do what?
Encode it.
How do I encode it? I have to first do what? How do I process it? Huh? We've seen it already. We've seen it, we hear it. To do these things, I have to do what? Oh, Jesus.
Retrieve.
Slide 1, yeah, go. Oh. It's simple. This is really simple.
Oh, retrieve it.
No. No.
Go over and over and over again.
For you to do all of this means you had to do what? What now?
Organize.
What? No. You want a word? Starts with an A.
Access.
It's got 2 words. One starts with a P, the other one starts with an A. P and then A. To do all of this, for this to even occur, for you to, there we go. Y'all don't do that. Exactly. Prove my point right there. Pay attention. Okay? That's what you got to do to actively rehearse. You have to pay attention. I just proved my point. Next time y'all send me an email like, I don't get it. I'm going to be like, did you do the first part? Pay attention. Okay? So, passive, you just let it happen. Active, pay attention. Got it? In regards to, you got to have a visual picture. You have to have an auditory picture. And if you had just paid attention, okay, it's right there on the board. Didn't even have to think hard. Now, sensory memory, let's go back a minute. Remember we had, what was the first time memory we had? Sensory. Then we had short term, and then we're going to finally have what? All right, sensory memory is non-working memory. Short term and long term is working memory. Sensory memory, non-working memory. Short term, long term, working memory. It literally means you have to put some work into it for it to happen. Okay, sensory memory is non-working memory. No work needed. And then short term and long term is working memory. You have to put some effort into it. What's the effort you have to put into it? Which is called rehearsal. All right, now, in regards to working memory, we have what is considered Batley's, he calls it a slave STM model. Why he calls it a slave model, I haven't figured that out yet. But it's 3 components to this aspect. The 3 components is a central, articulatory, and a VSSP. These different ways are how you memorize things. So the central part, this is the part that makes the decisions. It pays attention. Okay, so the central executive part pays attention. It also switches information back and forth in what should be paid attention to. So you have the central executive, we pay attention, we switch back and forth to decide what we want to pay attention to. Articulatory, it starts to recognize sound. It recognizes speech. So I'm paying attention, deciding what I'm paying attention to the most. I must pay attention to sound and speech. And then visual spatial, I must give it a picture. This is all happening in short-term memory. Okay? So I decide what I want to pay attention to. Do I pay attention to more to what I hear? Do I pay attention to more to what I see? And then I can create an image to switch over to long-term.
So right now, as we're writing, we're trying to pay attention.
Exactly. And some of you are literally just looking at it. Like, let me see how she's got this going. Some of you trying to figure out how I want to write it. So if we go back to it, that's a perfect, what Jonathan is doing now. I want you guys to tell me right now what is occurring in memory in an effort for you to take these notes. Biggie, thanks, Tia. You first had to pay attention. Then what? Repeat what you say in the head.
I have to write it down.
Write it down. You're still not telling me what the memory's doing. It's encoding. How? While you're writing it down, you're encoding. Keep going. You're seeing it. What part of seeing it?
Are you asking if you use everything?
I'm doing everything we just learned.
It's seeing what's on the board and hearing.
What part of you seeing? What part of memory is allowing you to see? You haven't even got to this part yet. It's the first part that you got. They got you to that part. What's the first part they allowed you to see?
Your eyes. The part of the brain that you're talking about, the rest of the
What? No, you haven't got to that part yet. First part of memory allowed you to see in an effort for you to get to the visual spatial part for you to process. What part in the sensory part? The iconic memory allowed you to do what? See it, and then what else happened? Okay. Echoic memory allowed you to do what? And then it sent it to where? And which part?
Well, it depends on which part you're focusing.
Central executive then decided which part I'm focusing on. You're telling me which part are you focusing on? So you're doing what? What part is doing what? Visuospatial, is doing what?
Is comprehending comprehending what you see, articulating memories.
From what? Okay, who got their information from where? There we go. That was it. Yeah, I see. Now, we started off where? Everything that you're hearing went into what memory? Sensory. Which parts? Echoic and iconic. Echoic literally is what you hear. Iconic is what you see.
Okay. So would somebody who would say they have a very good iconic memory, they remember everything they see?
They can picture things, and that's a good question. I can picture it. I didn't process it. Like you hear people say, I've seen it before. What was it? I don't know. Yeah, I don't remember where. I just remember I saw it. That's their iconic memory. We all have that. How many times have you said, it's on the bottom page right in the corner somewhere? And you're like, what page? I don't know. It's just a little green box. That was the iconic memory. It took a picture. It's there, but you didn't process anything, so you don't really have.
Do we not process because we just don't like to hear that much? Is that what
You didn't put the work in. You just literally automatically, like, there's only two things that do things automatically. Two parts of memory are automatic: time and space. What time did you wake up? Exact time. What did the clock say exactly the time when you woke up this morning? Did you sit at the clock and say, I got to remember what time this is? No. What happens is your clock time is automatically encoded into the brain. Space. How many of you put your keys in a certain space when you walk into the house? You just put them somewhere. Now, you can be in the house for 5 days. You know where those keys are? The reason why is because space is automatically done. But because you don't put in the work, it's gone. So, do we have it? Iconic memory is what we saw. We see these slides. We then send this to where? Central executive. Central executive sends it to what? Visual spatial, and then we are able to do what? Do what? Store it. Thank you.
So it goes from sensory to achievement.
Central, literally this part, this is inside of your short-term memory. So this is literally inside of the short-term memory, because remember, now we're about to put some work in. So inside of your short-term memory, your central memory takes all this information in. Your short-term memory then takes it from the central executive to say, I need you to listen to this. I need you to pay attention to this. I need you to hear this. I need you to pay attention to this. And it switches back and forth. So you'll hear sometimes people go, could you say that one more time? I need, right now, it literally says, I need you to listen more than I need you to see. Or then you'll say, excuse me, can you move over so I can see it a little bit better? I'll use, for instance, at church. Sometimes the women at church wear these big, beautiful, lovely hats, and you sit behind them. Now, I can hear what my pastor's saying very clearly, but sometimes I need to just see so that I can process what I keep hearing. I need to see his facial expression. So literally the central executive says, I heard what he said, but can you go and pay attention to what he looks like when he said it? Okay, now we can process it and switch it over to long term, and you can use it later. That's all that is. Does that make sense?
So to know, we probably don't have to know. You go from iconic to central. You have to central it, process it to
Exactly, because it was iconic,
the scene.
and then it stored it. And once it's stored it, you can do what to it? Retrieve it. Now, long-term memory, forever. It can last for hours up to years, and it is endless. It can hold your life. It holds your life. Long-term memory actually holds your life. You do not run out of space in long-term memory. Now, which part of the brain switches short-term to long-term? It was in chapter 2. Which part of the brain switches short-term to long-term? You and half the everybody else don't either. Which part of the brain switches short-term to long-term? It does. Thank you, Nia. Woo-woo. Hippocampus. The hippocampus switches short-term to long-term. So, as you're starting to remember things, the hippocampus literally just takes information and switches it over. Switches it over. Switches it over. It will switch over for the rest of your life unless you have Alzheimer's. If you have Alzheimer's, it deteriorates your hippocampus. You won't switch over. You will have your long-term memory standing, but your short-term memory will never function. So they'll tell you stories about when they were 12, when they were 14, when they were 19, but they will not be able to switch it over. If you have or catch Alzheimer's, you'll catch it probably in your late 40s, and it will start to progress over time. Okay, it progresses and it continues to progress until it destroys your hippocampus completely to where you won't even recall how to eat, how to breathe. Marijuana. Dementia. Dementia will just deteriorate the mind altogether. Once you reach 85, 50% of people will have dementia automatically, and it will progress over time. The brain will last. It's the processing. This is the reason why you don't. The body is falling. I mean, unfortunately, the body falls apart. So at the age of 25, when you reach 25, your brain is fully developed. If you are under 25, your brain has still not fully developed yet. Once you reach 25, it starts to regress, and you start to lose parts until you lose all. So you go up the climb, And then if you're 25, you are in the prime right now. You're fully developed. You're primed. You're great. You'll hit the spiral at 26. It's, it's not like you like 25. My name is Tia. 26. What's my name? You know, it's not like that. It's just.
So why is it that like people with Alzheimer's can remember certain things other over? It's like my great grandmother could remember who her daughter was, but could remember how to make biscuits that she learned how to make when she was 4 years old.
Because
Like 97.
the thing is, my grandmother died from it as well. And when she was 12, she would tell me like, I used to sneak and I did this, and I'm like, okay. And she would say, call my sister, and I would be like, well, your sister died 9 years before she did, and I would sit there and I go, Grandma, I can't call her, and she says, why not? I told you to call her. I'm like, Grandma, I can't call her, and then she'll say, she died, didn't she? And I'd be like, yeah. She said, I knew she was gonna die. I told her she was gonna die before me. And I'd be like, okay, we about to go through this depressing episode, and then she.
Why is that?
Because the short-term memory's leaving. So literally, we would sit there, we'd talk for an hour. She'll turn and watch TV, and she'll look over, and she'll be like, Ree, when you get here? Like, Grandma, I've been here for a whole hour. Like, we just finished having a whole conversation. My grandmother grew up in the South, so she grew up in Georgia. And when I came to her, I said, my grandmother passed 2 years after I got here. But before I left, I said, Grandma, I'm going to Georgia. And she says, don't do it. And I said, Grandma, why? Well, when my grandmother grew up in Georgia, my grandmother died at 86. So you can imagine what Georgia was like when she was 12.
Yeah.
So when I said, Grandma, I'm moving to Georgia, she said, don't do it. And I said, why not, Grandma? She said, well, let me tell you a couple of things I need you to make sure you do when you get there. I said, all right, what? She said, first, I need you to call my 2 aunts. Okay, my grandma, 86. I'm like, Grandma, I don't think I can call them. She said, just call them. I said, okay, when I get there, I'll call them. Probably won't need a phone, but okay, I'll call them. Then she says, I need to make sure you don't eat at restaurants where they don't want you to eat. I said, okay. And she says, and what you going to do when you get there? I said, I'm going to teach. And she says to me, when did they start letting colored girls teach in Georgia? And I said, Grandma, we not colored no more. And she says, you'll always be colored. And it was like, to her, it was still 1962. Georgia was the same place. And I kept saying, Grandma, it's not like that no more. And she said, don't let them fool you. It's still like that. And in her mind, no matter what, it just didn't matter because she could not remember or recall anything beyond that point. She began to stop forgetting to eat. She only could taste chocolate. All the rest of her taste buds, the hippocampus actually destroys all ability to remember taste. So the only thing she could remember how to taste was chocolate. So we would bring her chocolate to eat because it was the only thing that she would recall the taste of. Anything else, she would actually chew it up and spit it out because it had no taste to her. So she would take chocolate and she would actually swallow chocolate. And we would bring her Reese's and Hershey Kisses. And you would give it to her, you'd go upstairs, and when you come down, you would say, Grandma, what happened to all of the candy I just brought you? And she'd say, you didn't bring me no candy. And I'd be like, Grandma, where's the candy? I just brought you a whole bag of Hershey Kisses. Where did they go? And she says, you didn't bring me no candy. And I'd be like, Grandma, I did. You calling me a lie? Well, you didn't. That was a problem I just didn't want to get into because they get very angry. And you would lift up her sheets, and it would be all the empty wrappers under it because she had ate them all. And she'd be like, why you be putting them empty wrappers in my bed? She didn't remember eating them. She doesn't even remember me bringing them. She couldn't remember, and eventually she stopped swallowing.
Is there another reason why kids might do that? And it could be, and you're going, they're lying, but then you're going, maybe they're not lying.
When it comes, understand, my perspective is my reality. Does that make sense? My perspective is my reality. If me and you have a discussion in my office and I offend you, and I didn't mean to offend you, how are you offended? Do I need to apologize? Should I apologize? I didn't mean to offend you. You are offended. Do I need to apologize?
But she doesn't even realize I'm offended. To her, she didn't offend me.
So now I'm apologizing just to make you feel good, so it's not sincere. I'm just going to do it because you need it.
She doesn't know that she offended you though. She didn't offend you.
You come in my office and you say, Dr. Madison, can you explain this? And I say, my 11-year-old nephew gets this, but I'll explain it.
I feel really stupid.
He just chose to help you
Well, my say, you're letting.
I didn't bring you down. All I said was that this is so simple that my 11-year-old nephew can get it. But I mean, I'll explain it to you.
But I'm 20 and I don't get it, so it's okay.
So now you just offended me because you got loud with me. So who owes who an apology?
Nobody, you both walk away mad.
I'm gonna tell you, I have a student here. I'm not gonna tell you her name because I don't know her name. Um, had her 3 years ago, and she cannot stand me. She was only in my class for 2 weeks, and she says I offended her and I don't like her. And she said in the bathroom, the other student that I have comes to me and says, whatever her name is about to drop your class. My first thought is, who is she? And she says she's in the bathroom, and she says that you favor the black students over the white students, and she cannot stand you because you offended her. And I said, and I thought, that's what I thought. Like, what did I do in 2 weeks? Did she really? The hell?
There was someone that made me almost not take the class.
Wait, it's all okay. Sorry. Teacher mode.
It's okay now, because you're
Teacher mode. Okay. So, wait till I see her though, cause she still go here. Right. It's on now. It sure is. But okay. No. So. Now, it's a whole lot of memory coming back. All right, but now she switches campuses. She leaves Oakwood to go to Forsyth so she doesn't deal with Dr. Madison. Just because of me. So she goes to all other classes here, but psychology she takes at Forsyth so she doesn't deal with me because she does not like me and I offended her. Now, do I apologize to her?
If you don't know what you did,
I still don't know what I did.
What was you supposed to do?
No, that's her, that's your problem. You have your issue, that's on you. I mean, evidently, she's got some rooted problems already, but she was able to peg you like that in 2 weeks. So I'm like, I would.
So,
she could possibly be racist. It could be reversed.
Was you supposed to have been like talking, you've answered, somebody black before you did a white or something? Is that what you're saying?
No, she said, I don't know. She like, she never told
Years
me.
ago.
But it's like she said, a student came back and told her, so it's not, she didn't come to you and say, yeah.
she's in the bathroom talking.
See, so,
So why
Huh? I thought about it. Yeah, I thought about it, but I thought that might be wrong because I would probably came out like that. Yeah. My other side, what y'all see is Dr. Madison. Cherie might have came out in the bathroom, and I didn't want to get in the bathroom like, you got a problem with me? You want to address me? So I decided to stay Dr. Madison, you know. So. But right now I'm gonna go read my my professor, and Cherie might come out. But now the thing was, 2 months later, she comes into my office and she says, "Can you assist me?"
she came back to you?
Yes.
Oh,
And I said, "On what?" She says, "On the questions on my test." For what? Psychology. What do you need assistance with? I don't understand it. Did your instructor explain it? She did, but I don't understand it. She told me that you wrote the test. You are correct. Dr. Madison writes the test for all psychology classes on all 5 campuses. So the thing was, eventually, you're going to come back to me because now you need me. So do I go in regards to my memory of it being offensive, or do I help her? Now, and Tia is bringing a good point. That literally is, it wasn't about being a teacher. That had nothing to do with it. Because the teacher part said, go find your teacher. The religion part said, turn the other cheek, forgive, throw it in the fiery furnace. Vengeance is mine, said the Lord.
But if you know him working
So I said, sure, what did you need help with? Now she comes back every day and she'd be like, hi. I'd be like, hi. Every day. The memory that I'm holding is forever. Every time I see her, her picture is an iconic memory. I've seen her outside of Lanier Tech.
See, that's when I get.
So, iconic, I see her. She has a voice that's very distinct. I hear her. She triggers my short-term memory every time she comes about in regards to what do I have to deal with her right now. But long-term memory is forever. Whenever I see her for the rest of my life, I'll always remember her.
What if you asked her, is that time y'all were together that I heard you have a phone at one time? Do we think you explain that?
Because I don't care.
Yes, you do, because it still bothers you.
That didn't bother me. I just remembered it.
Exactly.
The wrong person. Probably because when it comes to, one, it was interesting that race always interests me. So when people do a reverse, it always inclines me to go, that's interesting. That you would find the opposite of what we usually find the other way. So it interests me like, that's interesting that she would come about that. And it also made me think, I wonder what I might have done that made her think that. So it does more, like when I read my, it makes me, like when I read my evaluations at the end of the semester, when I read them, I really do read them. And I read them and I go, that's interesting that they would say that. It doesn't bother me because I laugh at some of them. Like, yeah, some of them I laugh at because they really like crucial. It's a point to where we laugh at them in the whole Jeanette, like, did you get your report today? Let me tell you what mine says. I'm the worst ever. But I process this and go, I wonder what I did to make them think that. It holds into my long-term memory that next time I'll try not to do it in an effort that somebody else isn't offended because that's their perspective. Does that make sense? So if I say something to somebody and they go like, Shree, that offended me. If I talk to anybody else, long-term memory holds it. I then change how I say it to the next person because I know 10 years ago it affected somebody that I'm now going to have to use it.